In the quiet farming village of Riverside in Delta State, Nigeria, there lived an elderly woman named Grace Okoro. The villagers called her Mama Grace, though she had no children to claim the title. At 85 years old, her back was bent from decades of working in cassava fields and carrying water from the well. Her eyes, though surrounded by deep wrinkles, still held a sharpness that spoke of resilience through hardship. Mama Grace had survived floods, economic collapse, and the loss of everyone she once loved. But what weighed heaviest on her heart was a secret she had carried her entire life. She had never been intimate with anyone. She remained a virgin at 85, not by choice, but by circumstance. In her youth, Grace had sacrificed everything to raise her younger siblings after their parents died in a farming accident. While other girls her age attended school dances and courted suitors, she worked in people's gardens and cleaned compounds to put food on the table. By the time her siblings were grown and married, the young men in her village had already moved on. Years stretched into decades, and Grace found herself alone, invisible, forgotten. Every morning, she would sit on her wooden stool outside her small concrete house, peeling cassava with trembling hands. The smell of frying akara drifted through the air as neighbors prepared breakfast. Chickens pecked around her feet. She would hum old hymns in Igbo, her voice raspy but determined. It was her ritual, her way of reminding herself she still existed. But at night, when the wind carried the laughter of young lovers from nearby homes, Grace would lie on her thin mattress and weep silently. She had no children to care for her in old age, no grandchildren to bring her joy. Her womb had remained silent, her body untouched. She felt like a shadow in her own village, a woman who had lived but never truly experienced life. One humid evening, as rain pounded against her tin roof, Grace whispered into the darkness. "Before I die, I want to know what it feels like to be held, to be touched, to matter to someone, even if just once." The storm outside raged as if the heavens themselves had heard her desperate confession. She closed her eyes, ashamed of her longing yet unable to suppress it any longer. The next morning, everything would change. A stranger would arrive at the village market, and Mama Grace's quiet life would be thrust into a spotlight she never asked for. Her secret wish would no longer be hers alone. It would become the village's scandal, sparking a battle between tradition and compassion that would test everyone's humanity. As the first rays of sunlight broke through her window, Grace had no idea that her confession to the storm would set in motion events that would force an entire community to confront what it truly means to be human. Backhand index pointing right. Don't miss where a mysterious young man enters Grace's life. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update to this powerful story. Comment below what you think will happen next. Will the village show compassion or condemnation? The morning sun blazed over Riverside's bustling market. Traders shouted prices for yams, tomatoes, and dried fish. Women balanced baskets on their heads while children darted between stalls, their laughter mixing with the haggling voices. Grace moved slowly through the crowd, her frail body bent under the weight of a heavy basket filled with cassava she hoped to sell. Her hands shook as she tried to lift the basket higher on her head. The weight was too much. Just as she felt her knees buckling, strong hands reached out and steadied the load. "Mama, let me help you," a gentle voice said. Grace looked up to see a young man, tall, lean, with kind eyes that seemed genuinely concerned. He couldn't have been older than 25. His name was David Ease, a carpenter who had just returned to Riverside after completing his training in Port Harcourt. His hands were calloused from years of working with wood, but his grip was gentle as he lifted her basket. "Thank you, my son," Grace said, surprised. Most young people in the village ignored her, rushing past with their smartphones and modern concerns. But this young man carried her basket all the way to her small house at the edge of the village. When they arrived, a light drizzle began to fall, pattering softly on the zinc roof. David set the basket down carefully and turned to leave, but something stopped him. "You remind me of my grandmother," he said softly. "She also lived alone before she passed. I wish I had spent more time with her." The words pierced Grace's heart. She tried to smile, but tears welled in her eyes. She quickly turned away, embarrassed by her sudden emotion. That night, Grace couldn't sleep. The image of the young carpenter lingered in her mind. His voice, his gentle hands, his kindness. For the first time in decades, she felt something stir inside her that she thought had died long ago. Hope. The following week, David returned. He brought palm oil, firewood, and a small bag of rice. "Mama, please eat well," he said, settling onto a stool beside her. He listened to her stories about the old days, laughing at her jokes even when her voice cracked with age. Slowly, Grace's silent house came alive again with conversation and laughter. But the whispers in the village began almost immediately. At the community well, women muttered. "Why is that carpenter always at the old woman's house? Is something wrong with him?" Children giggled and sang cruel songs as they passed her home. "Mama Grace has a boyfriend. Mama Grace has a boyfriend." The mockery cut deep, but Grace tried to ignore it. For the first time in years, she had something precious. Companionship. Someone who saw her as a human being, not just a lonely old woman waiting to die. One sweltering afternoon, as the sun beat down mercilessly, Grace could no longer contain the truth pressing against her chest. Her voice shook as she spoke to David, who sat peeling oranges beside her. "There is something I must tell you before death takes me," she said. "Something I have never told anyone." David leaned forward, concern in his eyes. "Mama, you can tell me anything." Her lips trembled. The words felt impossible to say, yet they burst forth like water from a broken dam. I have never known a man. Not once. 85 years, and I am still a virgin. The silence that followed was deafening. Birds stopped singing. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. David's eyes widened in shock. He opened his mouth but no words came out. Grace gripped her wrapper tightly, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Before I leave this world, I want to know, even if only once, what it means to be touched, to be wanted, to be loved." The young man's chest rose and fell rapidly. His throat went dry. He stared at the elderly woman before him, her face wet with tears, her soul laid bare. In that moment, he realized he stood at a crossroads that would change both their lives forever. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling through the palm trees. The village seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. David sat frozen, his mind racing. He had heard many confessions in his young life, but nothing like this. His gaze drifted to Grace's trembling hands, to the profound sorrow etched into every wrinkle of her face. The silence between them was so thick, even the crackling of dry leaves outside seemed thunderous. Finally, he whispered, "Mama Grace, you mean all these years?" She nodded slowly, unable to meet his eyes. "Not once, my son. Not once. I have existed, but I have never truly lived. Do you understand what I'm saying?" Her voice cracked, carrying decades of suppressed pain. "My body will return to the earth without ever knowing warmth. My grave will hold only emptiness." The weight of her words settled on David like heavy stones. He had thought she was simply a lonely widow who needed company. But now he understood. He was sitting before a woman whose final wish pierced the very core of her existence. Outside, the drizzle turned into heavy rain, pouring over the zinc roof. Water ran down the concrete walls in thin streams. The whole world seemed to weep with her. David swallowed hard. He was only 24, with his whole life ahead of him. Yet here he was, confronted with a truth that demanded something from him, something he wasn't sure he could give. "Mama," he began, but his voice failed him. Grace wiped her eyes roughly, embarrassed. "Forgive me, David. I should not have burdened you with this. What can a young man like you do about such foolishness? Please forget I said anything." She turned away, pulling her wrapper tightly around her frail body. But her words burned in David's ears. He could not forget. That night, as he lay on his mattress in his rented room, the rain drumming steadily on the roof, her confession echoed in his mind. "Before I leave this world, I want to know what it means to be touched by love." He tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling. Questions tormented him. What is my duty here? Do I just walk away? Or do I help her find peace, even though it will bind me to her story forever? By morning, the rain had stopped. The earth smelled fresh and alive. David decided to visit Grace again. He found her sitting outside, roasting corn over a small fire. Smoke curled upward, carrying a sweet scent. She looked smaller than before, her shoulders hunched as if she carried the weight of her confession. "Good morning, Mama," David greeted softly. Her eyes flicked up, guarded. "Ah, David. You came again." "Yes," he said simply, sitting beside her. For a long time, they sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. Finally he said, "Mama, every person deserves joy before they leave this world. I don't know exactly how I can help you, but I want you to know, your secret is safe with me." Her lips trembled. "Do not pity me, my son. Pity is heavier than loneliness." "It is not pity," David said firmly. "It is respect. Respect for your courage to say what many would die hiding." She looked at him, her eyes glistening. For the first time in years, she smiled faintly. But just as that fragile smile lit her face, a loud voice cut through the moment. "What is this nonsense?" It was Mrs. Obi, a sharp-tongued neighbor who traded gossip like currency. She stood at the entrance to the compound, hands on her hips, eyes wide with suspicion. "So it is true. This young carpenter has been coming here every day. Mama Grace, have you no shame?" Grace's face drained of color. Her hands shook violently as she tried to cover the roasting corn. "It is not what you think, Sister Obi," she whispered. But Mrs. Obi had already turned, shouting loud enough for half the village to hear. "Come and see. Old woman has trapped a young man in her net. She wants to finish him before his life begins." Within minutes, a crowd began to gather. Children peered curiously. Women whispered to each other. Men shook their heads in disapproval. Grace sat frozen, humiliated, unable to defend herself. David rose to his feet, anger burning in his eyes. "Show some respect. This woman has done nothing wrong. She is simply my friend." But his voice was drowned out by laughter and jeers. Someone called out, "Friend indeed. We know what kind of friendship this is." Another shouted, "Abomination. What kind of relationship is this?" Grace buried her face in her palms, tears slipping through her fingers. The weight of shame pressed down heavier than ever before. And in that storm of voices, in that cruel spotlight of village gossip, she realized her secret was no longer hers alone. The whole village would now decide her fate. The crowd outside Mama Grace's house thickened like storm clouds. Voices rose in waves of judgment and speculation. Children pointed and laughed, their innocent cruelty cutting deep. Some women covered their mouths in mock shock, whispering just loud enough for everyone to hear. Men crossed their arms, shaking their heads slowly, muttering about tradition and proper behavior. Grace sat trembling on her stool, her wrapper clutched tightly across her chest. She wished the earth would open and swallow her whole. She wished her secret had died silently in her heart instead of spilling out into the merciless light of day. Now the entire village seemed ready to judge her. David stood protectively in front of her, his voice ringing out above the noise. "Have you people no shame? This woman fed half of you when your parents struggled. She carried your babies on her back when you were sick. And now you stand here mocking her? Is this what our community has become?" His words struck some like a slap, but the hunger for scandal was stronger. Mrs. Obi's shrill voice cut through the air. "David, you are the one who should be ashamed. You are a young man with your whole future ahead. Why are you always here? What does an 85-year-old woman have to offer you unless—" She trailed off deliberately, letting the crowd fill the silence with their dirty imaginations. Gasps rippled through the gathering. Some people spat on the ground in disgust. A teenage boy shouted, "He wants to marry her." The laughter that followed was cruel, stabbing Grace's heart like knives. Grace's hands shook violently. She struggled to rise, but her knees buckled and she nearly fell. David caught her arm, steadying her. He could feel her bones trembling under his grip. "Enough!" he thundered, his eyes burning as he faced the crowd. "You laugh at her because she is old. You mock her because she is alone. But one day, every single one of you will grow old too. And when that day comes, will you want to be treated the way you're treating her now?" The words silenced some voices, but others hissed accusations. "He is bewitched," one man muttered. "The old woman has tied his destiny with charms." Then, slowly, the village head, Chief Emeka Nwosu, emerged from the back of the crowd. His traditional wrapper swayed with authority, his walking stick striking the ground with each deliberate step. The murmurs fell quiet as he approached. He stopped in front of Grace's house, his sharp eyes moving from the elderly woman to the young carpenter. The weight of his presence pressed the crowd into tense silence. "Mama Grace," his voice was deep and measured. "Is what they say true? Has this young man been visiting you regularly?" Grace's lips quivered. She could not speak. Tears pooled in her eyes, threatening to spill over. David stepped forward. "Yes, Chief. I have been visiting her. She is lonely and needs companionship. I help her with firewood, with food, with conversation." "Is that a crime?" Chief Nwosu's sharp eyes lingered on him. "And is that all?" David opened his mouth, then hesitated. For a moment, the entire village seemed to lean forward, waiting with bated breath. Grace's breathing caught in her throat. Finally, David said, "Yes, that is all." But the pause was enough. The seed of suspicion had already been planted in everyone's minds. Chief Nwosu tapped his walking stick on the ground, the sound echoing like a gavel. "The honor of this village must not be stained. Mama Grace, you are respected for your age, but your closeness with this young man has become a source of shame. From this day forward, David must no longer enter your compound." Gasps rose from the crowd, mixed with murmurs of approval. Grace's heart dropped like a stone in water. Her only companion, her only source of light in the darkness of her loneliness, was being stripped away before her eyes. "No!" Her cry pierced the silence. "Chief, please. He is the only one who sees me as human. The only one who makes me feel alive. You cannot take him from me." But the old chief shook his head firmly. "Respect and tradition must be preserved. What the eyes see, the mouth will speak. And what the mouth speaks can become the curse of the land. We cannot allow suspicion to grow into scandal." Grace fell to her knees, clutching the hem of Chief Nwosu's wrapper. "I beg you, do not take him from me. He is all I have left in this world." The crowd gasped again. For an 85-year-old woman to kneel and beg publicly was beyond humiliating. Children whispered in confusion. Women shook their heads in pity mixed with judgment. Men turned away, unable to watch. David's jaw clenched as he tried to lift her up. "Mama, please don't do this. Stand up." But she clung desperately to the chief's garment, sobbing uncontrollably. "If you take him away, I will die. Please, let me have this one joy before my eyes close forever." Chief Nwosu looked down at her, his face unreadable. Then he gently pulled his garment away, turned his back, and struck his walking stick firmly into the earth. "It is settled," he declared with finality. "From this day, David must not step into this compound again. Anyone who defies this order will face the consequences." The villagers erupted, some in triumphant agreement, others in uncomfortable silence. The crowd began to disperse slowly, leaving behind a cloud of dust and crushing shame. Grace lay collapsed on the red earth, her tears soaking into the soil that had witnessed her entire life. David bent down, lifting her gently into his arms. His voice shook as he whispered, "Mama, I will not abandon you. No matter what they say, I will not leave you alone." But as he spoke those words, a figure appeared at the edge of the compound. His mother, Mrs. Ease, her eyes blazing with fury. "You!" she shouted, pointing an accusatory finger at her son. Come home at once. You will not disgrace our family with this madness. The air grew thick with tension once again. Grace froze in David's arms, her heart sinking even deeper. The storm of shame was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. David's mother stormed into the compound like a hurricane. Her wrapper was tied tightly across her chest, her headscarf barely holding back her fury. Her voice tore through the humid afternoon air, louder than the cicadas in the trees. "David, have you completely lost your mind?" she cried. "Do you want people to say my son is sleeping with someone old enough to be his great-grandmother? Do you want to bury me alive with shame?" The few villagers who had lingered nearby snickered, feeding eagerly on the fresh drama. Grace tried to rise from where she sat, her face streaked with tears and dust. "Sister Ease, please." Grace's voice trembled. "It is not as they say. Your son has only shown me kindness." "Silence," Mrs. Ease snapped, her eyes like daggers. "You have lived 85 years in this village with dignity. Now you want to end your days by dragging my son into ruin? Tufiokwa." Grace gasped as if she'd been physically struck. The Igbo curse word hit her chest like a blow. Her frail fingers dug into the earth as if searching for strength beneath the soil. David stepped between them, his jaw set. "Mama, stop. You don't understand. She is lonely and has no one. I am simply helping her. Nothing more." "Helping?" His mother's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Helping how? Carrying firewood, fetching water, or warming her bed at night?" The cruelty in her words sliced through the air like a machete. The lingering villagers gasped, some covering their mouths while others nodded as though she had spoken the very thoughts they feared to voice. Grace cried out, her voice breaking. "No, it is not like that. I have never touched him inappropriately. I only want to feel human before I die." Her confession burst out again, heavier and more raw than before. Each word trembled with decades of suppressed longing. David closed his eyes, the ache in his chest deepening. He wished she had stayed silent, but the truth could no longer be contained. Mrs. Ease spat on the ground in disgust. "You see. She admits it herself. This is not about kindness. This is about sin. This is an abomination. You, my son, will not set foot here again." Her hand shot out and gripped David's wrist, yanking him toward the path leading away from Grace's compound. But David resisted, planting his feet firmly in the red earth. "Mama, I cannot abandon her. Can you not see her pain? Can you not hear her crying? She has given everything her whole life and received nothing. How can I just walk away now?" His mother's eyes widened in shock at his defiance. For the first time, she realized her son was not simply helping an elderly woman out of pity. He was bound to Grace by something deeper, something she didn't understand and therefore feared. Grace raised her trembling hand, tears flowing freely down her weathered face. "Please, don't fight because of me. Let the young man go. If the world says this is wrong, then let me carry the shame alone." But David turned to her, his voice fierce with conviction. "No, Mama Grace. You will not carry this alone. If they call it shame, then I will share it with you." The words shook the very air around them, bold and reckless. The few villagers still watching gasped, their whispers exploding into urgent conversation. One woman muttered, "The boy has lost his senses completely." Another hissed, "The old woman has tied his spirit with dark medicine." Mrs. Ease's hand trembled as she pointed at Grace, her voice rising to a shriek. "Witch! You will not use your dying body to destroy my son. If he does not leave you right now, I will curse this house with my own mouth." Grace flinched as if struck. David stepped forward, positioning himself as a shield between the two women. "Enough, Mama. If you curse her, you curse me too." Thunder suddenly cracked in the distance, rolling ominously over the village like a warning drum. The sky darkened as if nature itself was responding to the intensity of the confrontation. Everyone froze, the atmosphere electric and heavy with unspoken fear. Mrs. Ease finally dropped her son's wrist, her voice turning low and dangerously quiet. You have made your choice, David. But remember this, a man who spits against the wind will have it return to his face. When the consequences come, and they will come, do not run crying to me. She turned sharply on her heel, her footsteps echoing against the hard-packed earth as she disappeared down the path toward her own home. Silence settled over the compound like a heavy blanket. Only the sound of frogs beginning their evening chorus by the nearby stream filled the void. David helped Grace back to her stool. Her hands were icy cold despite the heat, her breathing uneven and shallow. She looked up at him with haunted, grateful eyes. You should go, my son. If you stay, they will destroy you. Your own mother has turned against you because of me. But David shook his head, determination etched across his young face. No, Mama. Let them talk. Let them curse if they must. I will not abandon you. Not now. Not ever. For the first time in her long, lonely life, Grace felt a strange mixture of fear and profound relief. Fear of the fire that village gossip could ignite. Relief that someone, finally after 85 years, was choosing to stand beside her. But deep inside, she knew with a sinking certainty that this was not the end. The whispers would grow louder. The pressure would intensify. Soon, the entire village would be forced to choose sides, protect tradition and reputation, or allow an elderly woman's last wish to be acknowledged with dignity. As darkness fell over Riverside, a shadow of destiny loomed over them both, a destiny that would test not just their resolve, but the very soul of the community they called home. The night after Mrs. Ease's outburst was long and suffocating. Grace sat awake on her thin mattress, staring at the flickering kerosene lamp. Shadows danced across her concrete walls, whispering fears and accusations into her ears. Every creak of the wind through her window felt like another villager outside, pointing fingers and passing judgment. Her chest tightened with dread. She whispered prayers into the oppressive silence. God, is it a sin to ask for companionship before death? If it is, please forgive me. But if it's not, then please don't let me die with this emptiness consuming me. Meanwhile, David lay awake in his small rented room across the village. He could hear his mother's voice from her nearby house, muttering curses and calling on their ancestors to break whatever spell the old woman had supposedly cast on her son. His heart pounded. He knew this had escalated beyond simple gossip. It had become a war of reputation, honor, and family loyalty. The next morning, the sun rose blazing hot, with no clouds to soften its harsh glare. The village awoke buzzing with renewed energy. At the community well, women carried water pots on their heads while their tongues wagged even faster. At the market, traders whispered between selling vegetables and palm oil. The story of Mama Grace and the young carpenter had spread like wildfire across Riverside and even to neighboring villages. Some people laughed cruelly. Others spat in disgust. A few shook their heads in pity. But no one remained silent. By midday, David walked openly toward Grace's house, his head held high despite feeling dozens of eyes boring into his back. Children followed at a distance, singing a new, more vicious song. Mama Grace's husband is young, young, young. She tied his spirit with her tongue, tongue, tongue. The words cut like razor blades, but David clenched his fists and kept walking. When he reached Grace's compound, he found her outside, bent over her small fire, attempting to roast yams. She looked even smaller than before, as if the weight of the world had physically compressed her frail frame overnight. "Mama," David greeted softly. Her eyes lifted, red and swollen from hours of crying. "David, why did you come back? Can you not see? They are killing me slowly with their words and stares." David sat beside her, his face steady despite the turmoil in his chest. "Then let them talk until their tongues go dry. I told you, I will not leave you alone. If I abandon you now, you will die of sorrow. And I refuse to let that happen. But if you stay," Grace whispered, her voice breaking, They say we bring shame upon the entire community. Then let me carry that shame, David replied firmly. But I will not abandon you to face this alone. Fresh tears spilled down Grace's weathered cheeks. But this time, they were mixed with something else. Gratitude and disbelief that anyone would sacrifice so much for her. As they sat together in the afternoon heat, a long shadow fell across them. It was Pastor John, the leader of the village church, his Bible tucked under his arm. His stern eyes swept over them both with unmistakable disapproval. "Mama Grace," he said, his voice heavy with authority. "The elders have called an emergency meeting. They say your relationship with this young man is bringing disgrace upon our community. They demand answers from both of you." Grace's heart lurched in her chest. Her hands shook so badly that the yam she was holding fell into the fire, sending up a sharp plume of smoke that stung her eyes. "Pastor, I have done nothing wrong," she pleaded. "Is it a crime to want companionship in my old age?" But Pastor John's expression did not soften. "Come to the village square at sunset. If you refuse, the elders will come for you themselves, and their judgment will not be gentle." He turned and left, his footsteps echoing like drums of impending doom. Grace sat frozen, the fire crackling angrily beside her. "A public meeting," she whispered. "They want to shame me before the entire village." David placed his hand over hers. "Then we will face them together. I will stand beside you." By evening, the entire village had gathered at the central square. It seemed as though every single person in Riverside had come: elders, mothers with babies, teenagers, even small children. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, like the moments before a thunderstorm breaks. The elders sat in a solemn row under the large mango tree, their faces grave. Chief Nwosu sat at the center, his walking stick resting against his knee. The villagers formed a wide circle around the clearing, their faces a mixture of curiosity, judgment, and barely concealed excitement at the spectacle about to unfold. Grace was led forward by two young men, her frail frame trembling with every step. David walked beside her, his jaw tight with determination, refusing to leave her side despite the hostile stares. Whispers rippled through the crowd like wind through tall grass. Chief Nwosu struck his walking stick against the ground, and immediate silence fell. "We are gathered here because of a matter that threatens the moral fabric of our community. An 85-year-old woman and a 24-year-old man have given our village a story that spreads like disease. We must decide tonight. Is this friendship or is this an abomination?" The square fell deathly silent. All eyes burned into Grace like hot coals. The evening breeze carried the smell of cooking fires and dust, but Grace felt only the crushing weight of 100 judgments pressing down on her fragile shoulders. Her lips trembled as she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Chief, elders, people of Riverside, I have nothing to hide. Yes, this young man visits me. Yes, he sits with me and helps me. But never, never, has he touched me inappropriately. I am 85 years old, and I am still a virgin. That is the truth I carry." A collective gasp shot through the crowd like electricity. Some women clutched their wrappers in shock. Men muttered in disbelief. Children stared with wide, uncomprehending eyes. David stepped forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "She speaks the truth. She has lived her entire life alone. No husband, no children, no companion. Is loneliness now a crime in our village? Is showing kindness to someone in pain now considered an abomination?" But Chief Nwosu's eyes narrowed dangerously. His staff struck the ground again with finality. "Truth or lie, it does not matter anymore. What matters is perception. What the eyes see, the mouth will say. And what the mouth says can destroy a village's honor and reputation. That is why tonight, we must make a decision that protects our community." The crowd buzzed with renewed energy, torn between sympathy for the old woman's plight and fear of breaking with tradition. And as the sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Grace's heart pounded in her chest. She knew with terrible certainty that whatever judgment fell tonight would seal her fate, and David's, forever. The trial had begun, and there would be no turning back. The evening air in the village square grew heavier as each elder prepared to speak. Kerosene lanterns flickered, casting dancing shadows across the faces of the villagers. Every eye remained fixed on the trembling figure of Mama Grace and the defiant young carpenter standing beside her. Chief Nwosu raised his hand, and the murmuring crowd fell silent. "Let each elder speak their mind," he declared solemnly. The first elder, Mr. Okafor, cleared his throat. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding against stone. "In my 70 years, I have never witnessed such a thing. A 24-year-old man and an 85-year-old woman in such close companionship. Even if no actual sin has occurred, the mere suspicion is poison to our community. If we do not stop this now, shame will cling to Riverside forever. Other villages already mock us." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Grace's chest tightened with each word. The second elder, Mrs. Adeyemi, adjusted her head tie and spoke sharply, her voice cutting through the night air. "I do not trust this silence she has kept for 85 years. A woman who remained untouched for so long. Why would she suddenly break that pattern now? Something unseen is at work here. This is spiritual. If the young man is not careful, his destiny will vanish into the grave with her." Gasps echoed through the gathering. Someone whispered, "Witchcraft." Another voice hissed, "She has used dark medicine." Grace's tears burned down her cheeks like hot wax. She wanted to scream that she had done nothing wrong, that her only crime was loneliness, but her voice was trapped in her throat. Finally, Pastor John stepped forward, his Bible held high. His deep voice carried across the square with the weight of religious authority. "The good book says there is a time for everything, a time to be born and a time to die. Mama Grace's time is for reflection and preparation for eternity, not for desires of the flesh. If she has needs, let her bring them to God in prayer, not to a young man who could be her great-grandson." The crowd roared in agreement. Some clapped enthusiastically. Others shouted, "Amen. Preach it, Pastor." The tide of judgment rose higher and higher, threatening to drown Grace completely. David clenched his fists, his young face burning with righteous anger. He stepped forward until he stood at the very center of the square, his voice ringing out defiantly against the weight of tradition and judgment. "So because she is old, she no longer has the right to feel human," he challenged. "She has no right to want companionship? No right to wish for a moment of joy before she dies? You call it witchcraft because you cannot, or will not, understand it. But I tell you the truth. What you call shame is nothing but loneliness crying out to be heard." The crowd erupted into chaos. Some shouted in support, "The boy speaks truth." Others hurled insults, "Foolish child. He is bewitched. This is madness." But somewhere in the crowd, a few quiet voices murmured softly, "Maybe he is right. She is human too. When did we become so cruel?" Chief Nwosu's walking stick struck the ground again and again, demanding silence. When the noise finally subsided, his voice was calm but absolutely final. "Enough. We have heard all sides. Now I will speak my judgment." He paused, letting the weight of his authority settle over the square. "In this village, we respect age, but we also respect order and tradition. A young man must not be seen connected to an elderly woman in such a questionable way. It is not our custom. It disturbs the natural order." He took a deep breath, and the entire village seemed to hold its breath with him. "Therefore I decree, from this night forward, David Ease must not step into Mama Grace's compound again. He must not visit her, help her, or be seen in her company. If he disobeys this order, he will be banished from Riverside. This is my final word." The declaration fell like a boulder into still water, sending shockwaves of reaction through the crowd. Some villagers cheered the verdict, satisfied that order was being restored. Others shifted uncomfortably, troubled by the harshness of the punishment. Grace's anguished cry pierced the night air like a knife. No. Please. She fell to her knees in the dust, clutching desperately at the hem of her wrapper. Chief, I beg you, do not take him from me. If you strip him from my life, you strip away the last piece of humanity I have left. But Chief Nwosu turned his face away, his verdict given and immovable. The villagers began to disperse slowly, their whispers filling the night like buzzing insects. Some laughed cruelly at the spectacle. Others left in uncomfortable silence, unable to meet Grace's eyes. Grace lay collapsed on the ground, her tears soaking into the red dust. Her shoulders shook with sobs. God, why did you give me this longing if it was only meant to destroy me with shame? David knelt beside her, gently lifting her frail body into his arms. His voice was low but trembling with both anger and unwavering resolve. Mama, listen to me carefully. They can decree whatever they like, but they cannot control my heart or my choices. I will not leave you. Do you hear me? I will not abandon you. She clutched his hand desperately, her frail fingers like dry twigs against his strong palm. But if you stay, they will destroy you. They will cast you out of the only home you know. Then let them cast me out, David said fiercely, his eyes blazing with determination. What good is a home without truth? What value is a community without compassion? If exile is the price for standing by you, for giving you dignity in your final days, then I will pay that price gladly. Grace's eyes filled with fresh tears, but this time they were not only tears of sorrow. Somewhere deep inside her weary heart, a small flame of hope flickered back to life, fragile but stubbornly alive. But before she could respond, a new voice rose from the shadows at the edge of the square, deep, bitter, and unmistakably dangerous. You are brave, young man. But bravery without wisdom is nothing more than madness. The crowd, which had been dispersing, suddenly froze. Every head turned toward the voice. Out of the darkness stepped Chief Akin, one of the wealthiest and most feared men in the entire region. His expensive traditional attire shimmered under the lantern light, his gold rings glinting ominously. He had been silent until now, watching and waiting. He looked directly at David and Grace, his smile cold and predatory. If you defy the elders and choose this path, know this, it will not only be your name and reputation they bury in shame. It will be your future, your opportunities, your very soul. The square erupted into fresh tension and fear. Whispers spread like wildfire. Chief Akin has spoken. Now there will be real consequences. No one defies Chief Akin and survives unscathed. And Grace knew, with a dread that sank deep into her bones, that her innocent wish had awakened forces far more dangerous than simple village gossip. The real battle was only just beginning. The villagers shifted uneasily as Chief Akin stepped fully into the lantern glow. He was a man no one in Riverside dared to cross openly. His wealth came from palm oil plantations, real estate, and powerful political connections that reached all the way to the state capital. When Chief Akin spoke, people listened, even when they disagreed in their hearts. His smile was thin and cold, like a blade hidden in velvet. This matter has entertained me long enough, he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the tense square. An old virgin woman and a boy barely grown into manhood. It sounds like the plot of a bad joke. But jokes can destroy entire communities if we do not control them properly. The crowd muttered anxiously. Some nodded in fearful agreement. Others stared at Grace with renewed suspicion, as if seeing her through Chief Akin's eyes made her more dangerous. Chief Akin's gaze lingered on Grace with barely concealed contempt. Mama Grace, you have lived in this village all your life. Quiet, harmless, invisible. But now you stir unrest and division. I wonder why. His eyes slid deliberately to David. And you, young carpenter? Why waste your youth and energy on what death will soon claim anyway? The cruelty embedded in his words made Grace's heart shudder painfully. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she bit her lip hard to prevent them from falling. She would not give this powerful man more ammunition to mock her with. David stood tall, defiance blazing in his young eyes like fire. Chief Akin, I waste nothing. I give respect and dignity to a woman who has known only sorrow and loneliness her entire life. That is not shame. That is honor. The crowd gasped audibly at his boldness. Speaking back to Chief Akin was like striking a sleeping lion, dangerous and potentially fatal. The chief's smile hardened into something uglier. Honor? Let me educate you about honor, foolish boy. Honor is knowing your place in society. Honor is obeying your elders without question. Honor is protecting the reputation and image of your community. What you are doing is not honor, it is madness wrapped in youthful rebellion. Chief Nwosu nodded gravely from his seat. Chief Akin speaks wisdom. This situation cannot be allowed to continue. But David took Grace's frail hand and raised it high before the entire assembly. If you call this madness, then brand me as mad. If you call it shame, then let me wear that shame openly. But know this, no decree, no threat, no judgment can erase this woman's humanity. No one can forbid her from having one last wish acknowledged before she dies. The villagers erupted into chaos, torn violently between fear of authority and a growing sense that perhaps, just perhaps, the young carpenter was speaking an uncomfortable truth. Some whispered urgently, "This boy has lost all sense." Others murmured more quietly, "But maybe he has a point." Chief Akin's face darkened like a storm cloud. His voice dropped low, heavy with unmistakable threat. "You are young, David Ease. You think fire does not burn simply because you have not yet placed your hand directly into the flames. But continue on this path, and you will not merely burn. You will be reduced to ashes before your time comes naturally." Grace clutched David's arm in terror, her voice a desperate whisper. "Please, my son, do not provoke him further. Chief Akin is a dangerous man. He has destroyed families with a single word. Please, I am not worth your destruction." But David only squeezed her hand tighter, his voice steady and clear. "Mama, no one, not even the richest and most powerful man in this region, will silence us. Not now. Not ever." Chief Nwosu struck his walking stick one final time, the sound echoing with finality. "Enough. The elders have spoken. The decree stands firm. If David Ease enters Mama Grace's compound even one more time, he will be permanently exiled from Riverside. This meeting is now closed." The crowd began to scatter reluctantly, still buzzing with tension and speculation. But the whispers now carried an undercurrent of genuine dread. This was no longer just about scandal and gossip. It was about power, consequences, and forces that could crush lives without mercy. When the square finally emptied, Grace and David walked slowly back to her compound under the pale moonlight. The air was thick and oppressive. Frogs croaked warnings from the nearby stream. Inside the small house, Grace broke down completely. She wept into her weathered hands. "David, what have I done by speaking my heart aloud? I have cursed you. They will destroy you now. Chief Akin will not stop until you are completely ruined." David knelt before her, his young face illuminated by the flickering kerosene lamp. His eyes burned with a strange mixture of fear and unshakable determination. "Mama, listen to me carefully. All my life, I have searched for something worth fighting for, something that gives my existence real meaning. Now I have found it. I have found you, and your dignity is worth fighting for." He paused, then spoke the words that would change everything. "I do not care if they exile me. I do not care if they curse my name. What I care about is you, and I will fulfill your last wish, no matter what it costs me." Grace froze, her breath catching in her throat. She had dreamed of this moment in her darkest, loneliest nights. She had prayed for it in whispers. But hearing those words spoken aloud in the harsh light of reality shook her to her core. "Do you truly understand what you are saying?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Yes," David answered without hesitation. "I will help you know what it means to be touched, to be wanted, to be loved, even if the whole world condemns us for it." Grace's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. But the price, David. The price may be far more than you can possibly carry. He looked directly into her tear-filled eyes, his voice absolutely steady. Then let me carry it, alone or together. Just let me carry it. At that precise moment, a shadow passed outside the small window. Footsteps crunched softly on the dry earth. Someone was listening to every word. Grace's heart stopped cold. She whispered urgently, "David, someone is out there." He rose quickly, moving silently to the doorway. But when he looked outside, the night appeared empty. Only palm leaves rustled in the breeze. Yet from somewhere in the darkness, the faint echo of cold, mocking laughter drifted through the air, a sound both of them recognized instantly. It was Chief Akin. And they both knew, with terrible certainty, that the most dangerous phase of their ordeal was about to begin. The following morning, Riverside stirred with whispers heavier than the humid air. Women at the community well bent close as they drew water, their voices urgent and scandalized. "They say Chief Akin himself was outside her house last night, listening." Men gathered at the palm wine joint, shaking their heads grimly. If the chief has personally set his eyes on this matter, then complete destruction is inevitable. Grace stayed inside her house, her heart pounding with every sound from outside. Her wrinkled hands trembled uncontrollably. She had lived quietly for 8 decades, invisible and forgotten. Yet in just a few short weeks, her secret wish had dragged her into the center of a storm she had no power to control. David arrived at noon, carrying a small bag of roasted groundnuts. His face was tense, his eyes constantly scanning the area before he stepped through her doorway. "Mama," he said quietly, "they are talking everywhere. Chief Akin will not let this rest. He sees you as a threat to his authority now." Grace's voice was barely a whisper. "I heard his laughter in the darkness last night. It chilled my very bones. That man is not merely wealthy. He is ruthless. He has buried people for far less than this. If he decides to crush you, nothing and no one will be able to stop him." David sat close to her, gently pushing the groundnuts into her shaking hands. "Eat first, Mama. Build your strength. We can worry about fear later." She tried to smile at his courage, but fresh tears blurred her vision. "My son, I am terrified for you. The chief has destroyed entire families with just a whisper to the right people. If he decides you are his enemy, nothing will remain of your future." David looked at her steadily, though inside his chest throbbed with genuine unease. "Let him try. I am not afraid of any man." That evening, as the sun began its descent, a messenger arrived at Grace's compound, a teenage boy, barefoot, his breath ragged from running hard. He held out a folded piece of paper, refusing to meet Grace's eyes. "For you," he said to David, then immediately fled as if the paper itself carried a curse. David unfolded the note, his jaw tightening as he read aloud, "Come to my compound tonight. Alone. If you value your future at all, you will come." It was signed simply, Chief Akin. Grace's hand flew to her mouth in horror. "No, David. Do not go. It is obviously a trap." But David's eyes remained firm and resolute. "If I do not go, he will come for both of us in an even worse way. Let me face him directly. Let me hear what he truly wants." As night fell, David made his way to Chief Akin's compound. Unlike the rest of the village with its kerosene lamps and darkness, the chief's property glowed with electric lights powered by a massive generator. 2 aggressive dogs barked loudly at the gate as David entered, his heart drumming against his ribs. Inside the spacious compound, Chief Akin sat on an ornately carved wooden chair, sipping palm wine from an expensive glass. His traditional attire spread wide, making him look like a king on his throne. He smiled coldly as David entered. "Ah, the carpenter arrives. Sit down." David refused the offered seat, standing tall. His voice was steady despite his fear. "You sent for me, Chief. What do you want?" Chief Akin chuckled, a sound without warmth. "Straightforward. I appreciate that quality. He leaned forward slightly. Listen very carefully, young man. You are at the beginning of your life. You have energy, strength, decades ahead of you. Why would you waste all of that potential on a dying old woman? I can offer you real opportunities. Work, money, even land of your own. But only if you walk away from her. Tonight. Permanently. David's jaw clenched. I will not abandon her. Chief Akin's false smile vanished instantly. His eyes became cold and sharp as blades. Think very carefully about what you are refusing. This is not really about her. This is about your entire future. If you walk away right now, you can build something real for yourself. But if you insist on staying with her, you will lose everything. Your reputation, your opportunities, even your name will become synonymous with shame. David took a deliberate step forward, his chest heaving. If the price of my future is betraying a lonely old woman who has never harmed anyone, then I do not want that future. Keep your money and your land. I will keep my integrity. Chief Akin's laughter boomed through the room, but there was no joy in it, only dark amusement. Foolish, foolish child. Do you actually believe you can defy me and walk away unscathed? By tomorrow morning, your shame will not be mere whispers. It will be thunder that everyone hears. I will personally make certain the entire region knows you as the young man who sleeps with an 85-year-old woman. Your name will become a curse word. David's stomach knotted with fear, but he forced himself to meet the chief's threatening gaze directly. Then let the world hear whatever lies you spread. The truth is heavier than any lie you can tell. If this is the battle you want, then I will fight it with everything I have. Chief Akin leaned back slowly, his predatory smile returning. So be it, Carpenter. But mark my words carefully. Remember this night when the fire I set begins to burn around you. Remember you were given a clear chance to walk away safely. David turned and walked out, the chief's mocking laughter chasing him into the darkness like a malevolent curse. Back at Grace's house, she waited anxiously, pacing like a restless spirit. When she saw David's face in the lamplight, she grabbed his arms desperately. What did he say? Tell me everything. David's voice was low and heavy with foreboding. He said he will destroy us both. He offered me money and land to abandon you. When I refused, he promised to spread lies that will ruin my name forever. Grace sank onto her stool, her hands clutching her head in despair. Dear God, what have I done? My foolish loneliness has destroyed an innocent young man. But David knelt beside her, taking her trembling hands in his. No, Mama. You have given me something precious, a reason to stand for something that truly matters. Whatever comes next, we will face it together. Outside, they could already hear it beginning. Footsteps gathering in the darkness, voices rising with fresh rumors. Chief Akin had wasted no time. The final storm was gathering, and by morning, nothing in Riverside would ever be the same again. By dawn, the village was already ablaze with fresh scandal. Chief Akin had worked through the night, and his influence spread like poison through every corner of Riverside. At the well, at the market, in the church courtyard, everywhere, the same twisted story circulated. Did you hear? The carpenter finally confessed. He has been sleeping with the old woman. They say she gave him money and charms in exchange for, you know. It is witchcraft, I tell you. No normal man would choose an 85-year-old woman unless dark forces were involved. Children sang even crueler songs, their innocent voices weaponized by adult hatred. The atmosphere in Riverside became suffocating, oppressive, dangerous. Grace stayed inside her house, her hands pressed over her ears, but the words seeped through the thin walls like toxic smoke. Virgin witch, abomination, curse. The words echoed endlessly in her mind. David arrived mid-morning, his face grim with determination. Mama, Chief Akin has begun his attack. He is telling everyone lies, and they are believing him without question. Grace's lips quivered. I warned you he would destroy us. No one can fight a man with that much power and money. David crouched in front of her, holding her fragile hands. Then we will not fight with power or money. We will fight with truth. But even as he spoke, his voice wavered slightly with the weight of fear pressing down on him. Not long after, the village drums sounded. Boom, boom, boom. Each strike echoed across the red earth, summoning every single person to the central square. Villagers poured in from every direction, leaving fires unattended and shops closed. Something massive was about to happen. At the square, Chief Akin stood tall in spotless white traditional attire, a heavy gold chain glinting at his chest. Beside him sat Chief Nwosu and all the village elders, their faces heavy with the gravity of the moment. When the crowd settled into tense silence, Chief Akin raised his hand. His voice boomed like thunder across the gathering. People of Riverside, I warned you all. I told you this matter involving the old woman and the young carpenter would bring disgrace upon our entire community. Last night, I called the boy to my home. I gave him a generous choice, to walk away with his dignity and future intact. But he refused. His voice rose dramatically. He admitted before me that he would not abandon her, even if the entire world cursed him for it. Gasps rippled through the crowd. People murmured urgently to one another. Abomination, someone shouted. Chief Akin continued, his voice relentless. And last night, I personally heard them in her house, speaking of unnatural things. Things that should never pass between a young man and an elderly woman. The crowd exploded into chaos. Men spat on the ground. Women covered their faces in shock. Children stared with wide, confused eyes. Grace stepped forward, her frail body trembling violently. No. He is lying. We spoke only of companionship, of dignity, of silence. Chief Akin's voice cracked like a whip. He turned to face the crowd, his expression triumphant. If we allow this perversion to continue, our children will grow up thinking such abominations are acceptable. Our ancestors will turn their backs on us. This village will rot from within. We must act decisively, right now. Chief Nwosu struck his walking stick against the earth. What do you propose, Chief Akin? The wealthy man's smile was slow and cruel. Banishment. The carpenter must leave this village before sunset today. And as for the woman, her house must be burned to cleanse this land of the spiritual pollution she has brought upon us. The crowd gasped even louder. Some cheered in agreement. Others murmured uneasily, troubled by the harshness of the proposed punishment. David's voice thundered over the chaos, raw with desperate rage. No. You will not touch her. She has done absolutely nothing wrong. But Chief Akin's eyes glittered dangerously. Then go with her, foolish boy. Share her fate completely. Because by sunset, this village will know peace, or it will know ashes. The drums beat again. Boom, 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 like the heartbeat of impending doom. Grace clung to David's arm, her tears falling freely. My son, they will drive us both out. They will burn everything I have ever known. David held her close, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Then let them burn wood and concrete. They cannot burn what exists inside us, the truth of who we are. The villagers' chants grew louder, pressing forward like an unstoppable wave. Banish them. Purify the land. As the sun climbed higher in the merciless sky, Grace knew the hour of final reckoning had arrived. But just as the mob began to surge forward with torches and rage in their eyes, something unexpected happened. A voice, ancient, powerful, unwavering, cut through the chaos like a sword through darkness. Stop this madness at once. Every head turned in shock. Slowly making her way through the parted crowd came Mama Blessing, the oldest woman in Riverside, 91 years old, her white hair glowing like a crown, leaning heavily on her walking stick. The entire square fell into stunned silence. You fools! Mama Blessing's voice trembled with righteous fury. Have you forgotten everything? Was it not Mama Grace who nursed your mothers through difficult childbirths when there was no clinic? Was it not her hands that saved your children from fever? Was it not she who cooked and cleaned and gave everything she had to this community for 85 years? Her walking stick struck the ground with force. And now you want to burn her house and drive her out like a criminal? The true abomination here is not her loneliness or her wish to be loved. The true abomination is your cruelty. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some men lowered their eyes in shame. Women glanced at each other uncomfortably. Chief Akin snarled, his face twisted with rage. Old woman, this is not your concern. Do not interfere. But Mama Blessing's voice rang out even stronger. It is my concern. I am older than everyone here, including you, Chief Akin. And I say this before God and the ancestors. If you burn that woman's house, you will curse your own children and grandchildren. The spirits will not forgive such heartless cruelty. A visible wave of fear swept through the villagers. Several people dropped their torches immediately. Others stepped back, suddenly uncertain. Inside Grace's house, where David had pulled her for safety, she clutched his hand. Tears streamed down her face, tears of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. Finally, someone has spoken for me. But outside, Chief Akin was not finished. He raised his arm, pointing dramatically at Grace's small house. If you let sentimentality weaken you now, you spit on everything this community stands for. Choose, people of Riverside. Obey the wisdom of your leaders, or follow the foolish emotions of old women. The square erupted once again, torn violently between fear of authority and fear of spiritual consequences. The moment hung in perfect, terrible balance. And then, crack! A massive bolt of lightning split the darkening sky, followed immediately by thunder so loud it shook the very ground beneath their feet. The sudden wind extinguished half the torches instantly. The crowd screamed, falling to their knees in terror. Mama Blessing raised both arms to the sky, her voice carrying with prophetic power. You see? The ancestors have spoken. The thunder itself defends this woman. Panic rippled through the villagers like wildfire. People threw down their remaining torches, crying out, "Forgive us! We were wrong. The spirits are angry." Chief Akin's face went pale, his confident smile finally cracking. For the first time, his absolute authority had been challenged, not by human words, but by forces beyond his control. Chief Nwosu stood slowly, his own face troubled. He struck his walking stick once more. The signs are clear. We have been hasty and cruel. Mama Grace is innocent. The decree of banishment is lifted. A collective exhale of relief swept through the square. David emerged from the house, helping Grace walk forward on trembling legs. The villagers, who moments before had been ready to destroy her, now parted respectfully, many bowing their heads in shame. Grace's tears flowed freely, not from fear now, but from overwhelming relief and vindication. Mama Blessing approached slowly and took Grace's weathered hand in hers. "Sister, you are seen. You are honored. Never forget that." Grace could barely speak through her tears. Thank you. Thank you." But Chief Akin, his pride shattered, turned away sharply, his face dark with humiliated rage. He said nothing, but everyone knew. A man like that would not forget this defeat easily. As the crowd dispersed quietly, many villagers approached Grace with quiet apologies. Some brought food. Others simply touched her hand in silent acknowledgement of their shame. That night, in her small house, Grace lay peacefully on her mattress for the first time in weeks. David sat beside her, gently fanning her in the humid air. She reached for his hand, her voice barely a whisper. "My son, my heart is finally full. Not because I received what I originally wished for, but because I was seen as human. You gave me that gift. You showed me I matter." David's eyes brimmed with tears. "Mama, you have always mattered. Always." Grace's breathing gradually slowed, becoming peaceful and steady. Her eyes closed with a faint, contented smile on her lips, the smile of a woman who had finally, after 85 long years, been truly seen and valued. She passed quietly in the night, David holding her hand until the very end. At her burial the next morning, the entire village came. Not to mock, but to mourn and honor her. Mama Blessing spoke over the grave, her voice carrying across the silent gathering. Let Riverside never forget this lesson. Shame does not kill people, but cruelty does. And love, even in the strangest and most unexpected forms, is never an abomination. It is the most human thing we possess. The villagers bowed their heads. Many wept openly, even Chief Nwosu's eyes glistened with tears. Only Chief Akin stood apart, his jaw tight, his pride wounded but unbroken. And as the red earth covered Grace's body, David stood with tears on his cheeks but fire still burning in his eyes. He whispered softly, so only the wind could hear, "Your last wish has been fulfilled, Mama Grace. You are remembered. You are honored. And you will never be forgotten." The warm breeze carried his words across the village, across the fields, across the river, as if the ancestors themselves had taken them into eternity, where they would echo forever. The end. Backhand index pointing right. What an incredible journey. Did this story touch your heart? Subscribe to this channel for more powerful African stories that challenge us to be more compassionate and human. Like this video if Grace and David's story moved you. Share it with everyone who needs to hear this message about dignity, courage, and standing up for what's right. And comment below. What was your favorite moment in this story? What lesson will you carry with you? Thank you for watching, and remember, every person deserves to be seen, heard, and treated with dignity, no matter their age or circumstances. See you in the next story.